We had to get David on here. His man, the man of his dreams, at least for this offseason, Jim Schwartz, ends up signing with the Cleveland Browns to take over the defensive play calling duties here. David, it comes after a couple weeks, not even a couple weeks of Joe Woods getting the axe here. How pumped are you to have one of the best defensive coordinators probably on the market as of right now, maybe not on the market, but you got Jim Schwartz. You got to be pretty excited about this.
I'm jazzed, right? And I think a couple podcasts ago, I literally targeted him as like my favorite of the candidates. So fun fact, Jim Schwartz actually started his coaching career in Cleveland with Bill Belichick in the 90s. Now, 30 years later, he gets to kind of get to work fixing a talented but very flawed defense. Over his career, he's earned a reputation of like a no-nonsense guy. You can see that with like his trajectory of a very underwhelming Lions team when he coached them. Like they went from 2-14 to 10-6 playoff team in 3 years. I think he's going to be perfect for the Browns defense. They have a young, like, let's call it like a sophomore defense, right? There's a lot of second-year players. There's a lot of third-year players. And then you have like your veterans in Myles Garrett and Ward. And who knows if we bring back Johnson, but yeah, he's gonna be a demanding presence in that locker room, focused solely on defense, because that offense is a well-oiled machine, provided Watson comes back a little bit stronger than how he finished this year. But I think Schwartz is also going to be a very easy transition from Woods. Schematically, they do things a little differently, but they still use the same value the Browns have at positions on the roster. So basically, Schwartz is still going to use Garrett on the outside. The reason behind that is to force runs inside, right? You're bottlenecking the quarterback. Now, it didn't work for the Browns this year because they had no defensive tackles at all. So that's where that backfires. But I think the speed in our secondary might appeal to Schwartz. He never really had the talent in the secondary with, say, the Eagles that the Browns do now. And he won a Super Bowl with the Eagles, right? So there's going to be like a heavy focus in man coverage. But he's still going to look in cover three. He's still going to show and mix looks in cover three zone. But in terms of man coverage, in his 4 years in Philly, he ranked top 10 in man coverage usage 3 out of 4 years. And then the year he didn't, they were like 15th or 17th or something like that. So he's still top half of the NFL. Compare that with the Browns. Joe Woods never was higher than 23rd in his 3 years with the Browns in usage of man coverage. The thing that excites me most is his focus on the D-line. I think there's going to be significant changes. I would have said it before we even hired him. There's some significant changes coming to that D-line this offseason. But I think what Schwartz brings is kind of some pressure on Andrew Berry to go get D-line help immediately. And, you know, what that means is in the draft, you're looking at BJ Ojulari out of LSU. You're looking at Felix Uzama out of Kansas State. You're looking at Thule out of USC as like immediate targets in the draft. And then, you know, you have some dream targets in like Hargrave and Payne out of free agency that highly unlikely we were going to get either of those two, but like those are Hargrave is a dream target for this defense. And I'm excited because we're going to rebuild that D-line the right way with his presence in the locker room. And I think that no nonsense mentality that just kind of like that leadership that, you know, I think that's going to get the young guys motivated. And if not motivated, we're going to kind of filter out the bad apples. And I'm like thrilled for that. It's not going to be a world changing defense next year, but it's going to be worlds better than what it was this year.
I'd be excited too. And I honestly think that the idea of there being a drastic improvement isn't even that crazy. We've seen him do it time and time again at his other stops. You exclude what he did in Detroit. He's one of those guys that I feel like outstanding coordinator, just not probably cut out to be a head coach. And there's nothing wrong with that. How often do we come on this show and talk about sometimes being a coordinator? It's the greatest job in the world. And his players have loved him everywhere he's gone. But you can go back to whether it be Buffalo, whether it be Tennessee, whether it be Philadelphia, he's seen the drastic jumps. In Philadelphia, when he came on board, the Eagles had one of the worst defenses in football. They were 30th in yards allowed and 28th in points allowed. And in 2 years, he got him all the way up to 4th in both of those statistics. And yes, the Super Bowl, we often talk about the Philly special and Nick Foles, but what he did with that defense can't be understated. He was unbelievable. Massive home run, David. I bet you are on top of the world, and you have every right to be.
I want to ask you this question, David. There was minimum like 3 or 4 bullet points every week if you had to point out on a defensive side of the ball what the Browns had did wrong. Not bringing any specific player into this, what are you most excited to for Jim Schwartz to bring out in your defense this year?
I just like it's D-line, right? So even if even if you don't go and acquire anyone, I feel like the focus is going to be on doing more rotations on the D-line. What Philly was doing when they won their Super Bowl is they literally had two groups of defensive linemen that just kept cycling in, bringing pressure, stopping the run, doing it over and over and over again. And you literally statistically cannot get worse than what our current defensive tackles were at this year. So even if you go out and get a guy in free agency, he's statistically likely to be better than what we currently have. But our entire defense is predicated on the D-line being good and getting pressure on the quarterback. And if we can't do that, if it's just Myles Garrett like it was this year, you see us get exposed in the secondary. And it happened all year long. And you could literally, if you gave us 2 incredible defensive tackles, that entire defense would have looked unbelievably different all year long. And I think Jim Schwartz is going to fix that problem. Maybe not immediately, but there's going to be some growth on that D-line, whether it be through acquisition, draft picks, what have you.
You and I are big DVOA fans, David. The people outside of Cleveland, and I understand they weren't really a sexy team this year because they had Brissett starting for so long, but that's a Browns team that graded very highly, even with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. If you throw in a top 10-ish defense with Deshaun Watson even marginally getting back to what he was before the suspension, there's a real optimism here that the Browns can be a Super Bowl threat sooner rather than later.